What's the dumbest reason you've been disciplined at work? Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for the support. Was pulled into a meeting with HR for speeding in the parking area. I didn't have a car or a license. Had to show them my provisional to get them to believe me. Turns out the person who reported me had seen an Asian lady speeding and assumed it was me. Next story, I was working on the till in a canteen at the Highland Show in Edinburgh and was sipping on a tea or coffee, can't remember which. The morning rush had just passed, so I was sort of just taking it easy for a little bit and serving the stragglers as they came in, getting prepared for the lunch rush. My manager came up to me and said that one of the higher-ups had seen my drinking my tea, coffee at the till, and had said that if I want to do so, I'd have to go into the kitchen. It really rubbed me up the wrong way. Those shifts at the Highland Show were quite hard going, very long days for the whole weekend and quite tiring. So it really bothered me that some stuck-up manager had such a problem about me drinking something at the till. I basically just quit on the spot and walked out of there. It was quite funny, really, as my manager was like, "Well, you can leave after lunch. We need you until 4. And I was like, "You don't understand. I'm leaving right now, whether you need me or not." Next story, I've only ever had one. I was 1 minute late to the dot for a shift, and I was given a verbal warning. However, I had called 15 minutes prior as I was stuck in traffic due to a burst canal embankment. It was a miracle I even managed to get in when I did. All she said was, "You should have left earlier." Left earlier for an unforeseen circumstance? Okay. They refused to remove the verbal, so I handed in my 2-week notice. I had heard, a few months later, that the assistant manager was found to have been abusing their position and had given many staff members verbal warnings over the silliest of things. She was fired not long after. Next story. Someone had been stabbed outside of the office. I saw it happen and ran to the person's aid. I had yelled at our security guard to call an ambulance and the police. He completely ignored me. I yelled again, "Homer, call the police!" He complained, saying her name is not Homer. I got a telling off, but explained I didn't know his name, and it's not my fault he looks like Homer Simpson and didn't act during a security emergency. Next story. Got given a verbal warning for swearing in a conversation. Even though it was noted I hadn't sworn at anyone in an aggressive manner. I just said, "damn," in a sentence, basically. The guy who gave me the verbal warning had called me a damn idiot the week before. I handed in my notice the week after. Next story. Yep, that sounds like the couple of call centers I had the misfortune to work in. I was once told that I made people feel stupid by using too many long words. My manager then later told me that using the term okie dokie was hugely unprofessional. He also said that I spent too much time getting to know my customers personally, and that I should focus on getting off the phone as quickly as possible to support his statistics. I had so much positive feedback from customers that they decided to use as evidence that I wasn't doing the job correctly. Customers thanked me for being thorough, actively listening to them, actually solving their issues, and calling them back to make sure that everything was going well. My boss told me that context didn't matter. We only care about call stats. I tried on several occasions to get promoted off of the phones, but almost every single promotion went to the lads who would suck up to managers, or the girls who would relentlessly flirt with anyone above them in the hierarchy. Next story. Worked at a call center, was only there about a month and a half. Told the manager that I'm suffering with cystitis and will probably need to go to the toilet a few times between calls. But I am well enough to still work. After going on a third comfort break in 5 hours, the manager pulled me to one side and said I was behaving inappropriately by going to the toilet so often. Told her I'll just piss in my seat then, shall I? And promptly handed in my notice and didn't bother working my notice period. Next story. I worked for the local council in a non-client-facing role. The disciplinary was for not wearing a bra at work. Small boobs, hot weather, all female colleagues. I got sent home. The following day, I couldn't be bothered going to work because of the stupid reason for a disciplinary. My manager phoned me, "Why are you not at work yet?" I just told him, "I can't come in." "Why not?" he asked. "I haven't got a bra on." Got a second disciplinary. Next story. I got blocked one time when I was accused of breaking some PCS. I was walking back to my desk when the department manager called me into his office and told me to close the door. When you close the door, you're either getting good news or very bad news. He then laid into me for a formal complaint he'd received over me sabotaging company equipment. I'm sat there, stunned at what's being said and not able to mount any kind of defense. The manager really got pretty angry at my lack of professionalism and how hugely disappointed he was in me. I finally got my head in gear and basically asked him what the hell he was talking about, as I'd not been near any PCS at the time. "You were seen," he replied. "Seen? Seen where?" "Right outside the office where the PCs were, straight after they were found to be faulty." "Which office?" "Room?" "That room is on the corridor to the staff canteen and next to the bloody bogs." "I'd gone for crap!" I shouted back. Kinda lost my rag at this point. The look on the manager's face. I explained I'd been to the canteen, and a sudden call of nature as I left, vegetarian, high-fiber diet, meant I'd needed the bogs fast. I'd not been in the room and was only outside because I was rushing to the toilet. He apologized for jumping to conclusions and phoned the guy who complained. Got him to apologies as well. Next story? I failed to deal with job because I was off on leave. It ended in a letter of management instructions, which don't even exist in our discipline policy, because when the investigation started, I explained that I called my manager and had a 9-minute discussion about this job, phone log evidenced, 5 minutes after I became aware of it. I then produced an email sent 20 minutes after learning of the job to this manager and quite a few other senior people, explaining I was on leave next week and they need to contact my manager. She ignored all their emails for the week I was off and then tried to fit me up. I told her during the investigation I hope she understands Newton's third law. 3 months later, I'd put her under such a spotlight she left on stress, as only one of us didn't know how to do our job, and only one of us was a full-time union officer for 15 years. Next story. One of my many mundane tasks, completely unrelated to my primary clinical role in a GP practice many years ago, was to clean the staff kitchen. I never minded. I'd grab a brew and some scrubbing clothes and give it a bloody good scrub. Quite therapeutic, really. I was once called in on my day off by the deputy practice manager and given an almighty blocking for leaving the kitchen in a damn disgraceful state the day before. It was one of those blockings where you just stand there wondering what the heck someone's going on about as they get redder and redder screaming at you for about 10 minutes. I let the guy finish and asked what was wrong with the kitchen as I'd given it a particularly good clean the day before. He told me there were crumbs everywhere. I knew this was nonsense, so asked him to show me. He stormed off to the kitchen, opened the bread bin, and showed me about half a dozen crumbs in the bottom of it. Crumbs in a bread bin! I was called into work on my day off and given a blocking for leaving crumbs in a bread bin. Next story. Not me, but a colleague. HGV Repair Shop. Varied group of older gen customers from mainly laddish environments. Mostly they talk bollocks, and depending on the customer, so do we. New guy took a phone call. Took a booking and finished it with, "No worries, we'll see you then, mate." Thought nothing of it until the customer complained to the upper echelons, and then he got a disciplinary. Apparently he spoke too casually for their liking and customer took offense. Basically threatened to pull out of a contract unless the lad was disciplined. Next story. I got a warning when I worked in the stockroom of a shoe shop in the Metro Center, had just finished a 10-hour shift on a mental busy day, and was in a class mood. Burst through the door onto the shop floor singing the first bit from There Must Be an Angel by the Eurythmics. The manager, who never liked me anyway, gave me an official warning because I made her lose count of the cash she was counting. I quit not too much longer after that. Next story. For sitting down, I was working for a temp agency back then and was working on a bar in a shitty horse race course. Every customer was gone to see the races, everything was clean and sorted out, so we thought we can sit down on empty crates for a few minutes. Some old bag complained to the manager that we are being unprofessional. She wasn't even going to order anything. She just showed up, complained, and walked off. Next story. Doodling on my notepad during a management meeting. No different to any meeting we'd had the previous 5 years. Half of it is like spider diagrams, etc. The other half, yeah, just little scribbles to keep my hands busy during tedious meetings. My boss was just a particularly unpleasant person and had decided I was her next victim. They brought in another similarly unpleasant manager from another area for the disciplinary, and while it started off all high and mighty, "You wouldn't get away with this in my meetings," it soon became very clear it was a pathetic waste of everyone's time. When it was time for them to consult with HR, it was very swiftly ended with no action taken. The manager brought in suddenly resigned the following week when an investigation was opened looking at fraudulent transactions in her store, and whilst unrelated, I did send her a message asking if I wouldn't get away with doodling because I'd have been too busy cooking the books. Different story, but was asked to take notes in a disciplinary where a staff member has called the store manager an idiot. The two had been close pals before they decided working together would be a good idea. Was quite hard knowing how awful the manager had been to her in recent times, and when she was dismissed and had left, I was asked my thoughts on the whole thing. I decided to say I thought it was harsh being sacked for telling the truth. Next story, former call center worker. These were all within first 6 weeks in the place. Got called into a meeting during training as someone had complained about me using sexist terminology. My crime. Asked if I enjoyed quad biking when I done it. I replied, yeah, it's great, real boys with toys stuff. First monthly review meeting with new manager. Manager expresses a concern, as I have been nearly late 3 times in last week. My response, nearly late? You mean on time? Second monthly review meeting, same manager. Manager expresses another concern as no one knows anything about you. You just come in, sit down, get on with your work, and don't join in any of the chats or anything. Actually talking to people, this was days before Teams chat, etc. existed me. So I am in fact getting criticized for not skiving here? Yes, kids. Call center life really is every bit as bad as you hear it is. Next story. I work for Royal Mail. The office manager always started briefings the same way. I don't want to sack anyone, but... And this morning was no different. So we were warned we would face disciplinary action leading to dismissal if any of us was caught with dog biscuits. Apparently, we were encouraging dogs to attack us for a bonio. Next story. For refusing to stop shoplifters after I got jabbed with a dirty needle by one a few months prior. Well, X stops them. X got arrested for punching a goose. Next story. I was once informed on a new policy by a local council director who asked me to confirm I agreed with it. I was happy to confirm I would act in accordance with the policy, but was hauled before HR because I refused to pretend it made sense. HR perceived this as insubordination. I laughed. I was disciplined and had to report to my line manager on a weekly basis how I was improving my interpersonal relations. My manager, TBF, was like, WTF is wrong with her? Next story. I called someone out a bit for saying something slightly idiot and said something along the lines of, you shouldn't imply all Chinese people are the same. It wasn't a big deal. I was just saying be mindful of your language in an office setting. Cut to me getting pulled into a meeting with my manager as someone had overheard me saying, all Chinese people are the same, and reported it. I know who it was anyways, and it wasn't a mistake. They were just being a little idiot. All lil idiot are the same. Next story. This was 15 years ago. A number of people were waiting for an update from me regarding when they could do something. I was waiting for an update from my team to say their work was done so the others could start. I had communicated this. Everyone was on a single email trail. One manager, who wasn't involved as he didn't need to be, emailed me directly to ask for an update minutes after I sent the latest one, confirming he'd been told the contents of my last email but wanted to know the situation. I then got the update that my team were done. So I replied to the email trail and CC'd the manager. He went ballistic that I CC'd him and didn't reply directly to his email. He also complained that I declined an invite to a meeting where he wanted to discuss me taking on extra work that was outside of my legally binding statement of work, which I had also been explicitly told not to agree to, rather than attend the meeting and argue with him as to why I shouldn't be there and couldn't do the work. I put in the decline response that it was out of my scope, but he still escalated. He said I was unprofessional. Next story. Not formally disciplined, but I was once told off by a manager for wearing flat shoes. When I told him I preferred flat shoes, as I had a bad knee, he asked if I had a doctor's note. He was wearing trainers. Unsurprisingly, I jacked that job in as soon as I could. I was there as a temp, and for some reason, they thought I was a permanent employee. I lasted a fortnight. Next story. I got told off for my tone in an email. The person who read it had a tone in their inner voice. There was no tone in the email or in my inner voice when I wrote it. Next story. I was an apprentice, got taught by one of the company owners how to set up the machine I was working on for a particular job, had completed this particular job that exact same way many times successfully myself, and even the other bloke worked on these machines set it up that same way too. It was basically the accepted and taught way at the company to complete this job. I am told one day to set this job up so that the other apprentice who was new that year could run it. Set it up the same as always. Show him how to run it, and check his first few to see he is doing it correct. Then leave him to crack on. Come in the next day, and both company owners are stood at the machine I am working on with the job of the other apprentice on the floor next to them. The office-based and main owner, not who showed me how to set it up, continues to go bollock me and blame me for the crap work of this other apprentice, in front of everybody else in the workshop too, and say that it is my fault for how the machine was set up. The other boss, who had taught me to do it like this, stood there and said absolutely nothing the whole time, even when I pointed out it is the accepted way to set it up in the company and is never an issue the 100+ times before we had run it. The apprentice that messed it up got nothing said to him except that it was my fault for how I set it up, and when I confronted him about why he didn't speak up and take some blame, he used this as his reasoning. Dude was completely useless too, and only made it through 2 years of his apprenticeship before being sacked for incompetence. No idea how he even lasted so long. My big regret was not sticking up for myself more, as I was a young apprentice, fairly new to the world of work. I didn't feel like I could and just took it for the most part. I also learned not to trust that workshop owner to back me up on anything, and to cover myself instead. Next story. Apparently I tried to blackmail Tesco, according to the HR manager at the store I worked at. It was a second job whilst I completed my apprenticeship, needed the money. I'd finished the apprenticeship and was now on a good wage, so didn't need the Tesco job, but I kept it because it wasn't an inconvenience yet. Unfortunately, they couldn't grant a holiday request due to staffing issues, so I decided to hand in my notice. I only had a 1-week notice period, and the day off I needed was 9 days away. No malice or arguments, just unfortunate. Then mid-shift, I get called to the manager's office. She starts with, "Do you understand how serious blackmail is?" After a bit of confusion and me laughing at her, she claims that me quitting, unless I can have a day off, was blackmail. After I'd finished laughing at her, she tried another approach. "What will you do for money? Have you thought of your family?" The look on her after I explained that I was a qualified and fully employed engineer, and Tesco was just an old habit. It was lovely. Anyway, she ended on a good note and stated that she wouldn't accept the resignation today because she'll do her utmost to find me cover. Great news, so I thought. My potential last shift arrives, and I still don't know if they found cover or if I've quit. Mid-shift, she finds me and explains she couldn't find cover. She then explains that because she didn't accept my resignation, it would only be effective from today. Therefore, I would have to work on the day off I needed. I just shook my head and said, "Word it how you want. I physically will not be in this town on Saturday." Bless her and her false sense of power. Next story. I always remember my previous manager asking me if I felt stressed at work. I said no, not really, and it just got under his skin so much. I always wonder if it was the right thing to say or not. Truth is that I could do most of the tasks in about 2 hours, then spend the rest of the day doing other stuff when WFH. Next story. I had a life-saving surgery and needed 10 weeks off to recover. During my absence, I apparently had a disciplinary meeting. On my first day back, I had a final warning meeting. Next story. I got disciplined over starting a group chat with some people who were in a previous team, who were moving teams like I was. It got suggested by a manager, and there were witnesses. The next day, I received an email from a senior manager saying I'm being unruly and going against the rules, and if I don't take the group chat down, they'd be looking at firing me for misconduct. Over a group chat. By the way, there are a trash ton of informal group chats at work. One that has existed since COVID times, where all they talk about is gossip and planning on lunches together on office days. So it was all a mistake that I got this strict, nasty email instead of explaining that informal group chats aren't allowed, and the other informal group chats should have been taken down too in that case. Luckily, I had people stand up for me that had witnessed the manager suggest that, and that manager spoke on my behalf too. So the written up/disciplinary got taken down. I'm still salty about it. I left a group chat started by someone who was leaving the job because I didn't want to repeat. Honestly, I just think that senior manager doesn't like me. I was the only one she didn't give a Christmas card to. Just sucks because she does promotion interviews. So I DK the likelihood of me ever getting promoted. Yes, I know I can just find another job. Next story. I had my appendix out and a couple of weeks off work. Came back for a month and was hit with the worst cold ever, and they sent me home. I was disciplined for having 2 sicknesses within a 3-month period. Next story. For drawing a cock on a box of dog treats. Working part-time in a supermarket. Another member of staff had drawn a big bogey going into a dog's mouth on a box of treats and stuck it out on display. I was told about it and went to go see it. Later, I get called into the office by the store manager, who said he'd just watched CCTV of me drawing something crude on stock. I said I knew what he was talking about, but I didn't draw it, and that the footage he would have would be me going to look at it. He started some speech about how if this was a court trial, he would have enough to convict me beyond reasonable doubt. Didn't go any further than that conversation, though, so no formal discipline or anything, but always makes me smile remembering how stupid the conversation was. What the fuss was about anyway? Dog looked delighted. Next story. I got disciplined and lectured on equality by my manager on the first day of my new job as a dental nurse. I asked a fellow coworker if they felt nervous about handling dirty instruments covered in other people's blood, after a lesson on injuries and disease contracted from potential injuries from handling and washing used instruments. Apparently, I was being discriminatory for being concerned about potentially catching Hep C or AIDS. It was my first damn day. I asked a simple question. I didn't have daily exposure to such things before starting work there, and was nervous about the risk. How is that discriminatory? Next story. I was disciplined for wearing trainers in the office after I broke my toes by accidentally running into a door frame barefoot. My foot was so swollen I couldn't get any other shoes on, which I explained, but the office manager was a miserable job's worth. I took my shoe off in the disciplinary meeting and made them look at my revolting, massive purple and yellow foot though, and they recoiled, so that was satisfying. Next story. An engineer I worked with cycled to work in the rain, so microwaved his gloves to dry them. I, an accountant, was somewhere in the vicinity when he did this. Someone told HR. HR thought the mild-mannered accountant was a better target to rawlock in front of the whole office than the offending engineer, or the person who saw him do it and reported it. Next story. When I worked in retail, a lady came up to me and asked where the biscuits were. I took her to the aisle, and I thought that was that. She thanked me, and then asked which were the ones her grandson liked. I told her I didn't know who her grandson was, so she proceeds to lecture me about how her daughter shops there every week and always buys a pack for her son, and I should pay attention. Still none the wiser, I said we had a lot of regular customers, so wasn't sure who she meant. She huffed and walked off down the aisle. Fast forward a few days and the store manager gets an email from head office, as the lady had complained about my lack of customer knowledge. Because she'd gone to head office, he had to follow it up, and we had a one-on-one meeting about it. But we did it in the car park while having a cigarette and a laugh about it. Next story. I was in a mandatory training session run by HR, just some general trash, nothing specialized. Just as it was about to start, my direct report calls and says the director wants some info that only I work on. I had gone outside to take the call, so I said I would message where it was. I go back in and start the session and pay as much attention as I can while messaging directions. I get confirmation they've got it, so I put my phone away and carry on the day. Almost no disruption. About a week later, I get pulled up by my manager for being distracting and on my phone in the session. The director wanting info wasn't a good enough reason apparently. Plus, HR person never said anything. I simply said no problem. I won't answer any requests while I'm out on a training session, and they can wait for the next working day. Next story. I've never been formally disciplined, but my old boss and company owner shouted at me because I didn't attend a meeting that I wasn't invited to and knew nothing about. He knew about it and knew what time it was. He asked me what I was going to be doing, as I later found out, when this meeting was being held. I told him I was going to be somewhere over an hour away from where this meeting was, so he knew I wasn't attending it. He decided it was my fault when the client asked why he didn't attend it, so he lashed out at me in the middle of the office. He wasn't expecting my reaction when I jumped down his throat and gave him a dressing down in front of everyone. When he realized he looked stupid, he then blamed the whole office for poor communication. I have a 3 strikes and out rule. When a superior pisses me off to the point where I feel like I don't want to be there, 3 times, I look for a new job and leave. This incident was strike 2, and I left 3 years later after I had the 3rd strike. Next story. Me and a colleague got pulled in, as some RAM and other parts had gone missing out of office PCs. This was early 2000s. And one of our colleagues, being ex-police, had decided we were the culprits. Even though there wasn't a shred of evidence to back this up, it was based on the fact we spoke about PCs and building, fixing. To say we erupted was an understatement. No action was taken against the member of staff. We were temps and had seriously considered quitting, but decided to stick it out. Next story. I got a warning for getting someone's name wrong, despite it being spelt wrong, and the person himself never correcting me. When I explained, I was told that I should have known. I was also shouted at after a scheduling mix-up cost me a day's wages, and I complained about it. All I wanted was an apology. Next story. I was told off and docked my tea break for being late. My train was late because somebody had jumped on the line and pass. That was 13 years ago, and I'm still pissed. Next story. I worked in a nursery, and one mom said she didn't want any of us to lie to her. She wanted cold, hard facts about how her baby's day has been, and to not sugarcoat it. I told her one day that her daughter had been a bit upset and whined a bit at lunchtime, but after her nap was much better, she reported me for using derogatory terms such as upset and whined. Mind you, I was 17, an apprentice, and had only been there a week working 11-hour shifts. Next story. Was working a second job a few nights a week at a Pizza Hut. Told my manager, who was a great guy, that I was going to be away for 2 weeks as it was my birthday. He okayed the time off. The week before my time off, they changed managers. When the new rota went up, I informed the new manager that I had booked time off as I was flying out and would not be in the country for the 2 weeks. She told me the time off was not approved by her, so I needed to work my shifts. Again, told her I would not be here to work, and she walked away from me. I get a phone call on the night of my birthday, and I look at the phone and reject the call. They ring 4 times before I pick up, and as I'm already in a noisy place getting food and drinks, I answer it on speakerphone and try and explain to the person what's happening. While I was away, they sent a letter to my house with a formal hearing date for 3 days after my birthday. So the day after the call, then posted the letter. On my return, I read the letter and I went to the store and was told I had been fired as I was a no-show for 4 shifts and the hearing. I just laughed at the manager and walked out. Went to the store my old manager was at and talked to him to see my options. I didn't really need the job, but liked the work and staff. He offered me my hours at his store and said that 7 staff had put in for a transfer that week. Next story. New temp overheard me quoting one of the other admin staff, "Looks like we have another useless temp." The new owners, who had just bought the company I'd worked at for 10 years, took her word over mine and dragged me to head office an hour away to be blocked by the MD for calling her a damn useless, lazy-ass temp. Told him it was all bollocks, and told him I'd put in an official complaint against the company not following proper HR processes. Heard nothing more about it, and unsurprisingly, when I got back to the office, the temp was no longer there. Worked there for another 4 years, and royally took the piss out of the whole organization until it went into liquidation due to massive fraud. Idiots. Next story. I was sick. I turned up to work and tried to do my job as best I could. Manager came and told me to go home and take the rest of the week to rest, and hopefully be better for the following Monday. Definitely felt better on the Monday, so returned to work where I was pulled into a meeting about my attendance, where I was given a verbal warning. Apparently my manager hadn't informed higher-ups that they had authorized the time off and wouldn't back me up when I mentioned it. Wrote my notice on the back of my copy of the meeting notes. Next story. Worked in a bookies. There used to be con men who would try wait to pay until after the race. Our procedure was, scan the ticket, but don't press confirm until they paid. Doing this made an image in the system that was trashed, but if confirming after the off, it wouldn't let you process and would void. I did this, reported the attempt, and was pulled into disciplinary. Literally sat down, and the area manager said, "I can see you did everything as procedure, you can go." Okay, thanks for letting me waste a few hours of working time. Next story. I worked in a shop while at uni. I was allowed to give refunds up to £100 without management authorization. My manager complained I was giving refunds close to my limit without calling her. So, I started calling her for any refunds over £90. She then started complaining I was calling her unnecessarily. Next story. I got called into HR for being too positive and not stressed. The company was short-staffed, overworked, and everyone was stressed. Due to not being bothered, HR pulled me in for a chat as I was too happy. That's just me. I work as hard as possible, but at the end of the day, it's not my company that's going under. They thought my job was easy. No, I was just very good and experienced. When I left, they realized how much work there was and hired 3 people to replace me as they couldn't keep up. Next story. I got called into the HR once because I closed an open window next to my desk. In winter, a lady on the opposite side of the office decided she was hot and I had no right to close the window despite having no idea she was in fact warm. she put in a complaint about me. I told them to switch our places if she wanted to sit next to an open window, but she didn't want to leave her desk. I said, "Tough then. I'm not sitting next to a bloody open window in the middle of winter." Next story, I was never told of a rule change. Something they was always made clear was not my job. Suddenly is my job, and no one told me. So I don't do it, because it's not my job, and I've been explicitly told not to do. Now it is my job, but no one told me. I didn't do it, because as far as I know, it's not my problem. But now it is my problem, and I don't know. I didn't do it. I'm in the crap for not doing it. Next story, not me, but a colleague. Contracted hours 8:30 to 5. Asked that, if possible, could a meeting not be after 5 on Friday? Got told afterwards he wasn't prioritizing the company. Other days he got up at 2 a.m. to have meetings with Asian customers. He left 2 weeks later. Next story, probably for working from home when I was ill. This was during COVID, and the company had a working from home policy. It wasn't an official disciplinary, but my manager told me the head of department wasn't impressed. Next story, I once ended a memo with "muchos gracias." Another time I was on site for an hour after my shift ended, waiting until it was time to head to my second job, and the new manager we had didn't like people hanging around. Next story, a wizened, unpleasant customer saw me outside on my break, reading a book and smoking a rollie. She objected to the book and complained to the manager. Being a weak, stats-chasing twat, he gave me a verbal warning. Next story, I got ticked off and written down in my annual performance assessment for closing legacy products down and agitating the other directors because it doesn't show teamwork. My job? To close legacy products that have been around for 40+ years because the product directors never closed anything, milking the revenues, but recognizing they are all loss-leading because they are only measured in sales value. You cannot make that crap up. Marked down for literally doing my job and calling out the trash. Next story, years ago, but I once said in an email chain that a person at one of our third-party partners was being needlessly difficult, and that was literally it. I didn't insult them or anything. Someone else in the chain eventually replied directly to the third party, and, yep, you guessed it, included the entire chain. Somehow, this was my fault. Next story. I got called in for looking at Bon Jovi's website at my desk during my lunch break, instead of using the communal computer in the lunchroom. This was 2002, 2003, and I guess using the internet for personal use at your desk was a big no. How things have changed. People will actually look for another job at their desk these days. Next story. I was pulled into a meeting room and had a formal warning from my manager, who told me it was informal, but the whole session was documented and minute, about being too helpful and being too supporting to my colleagues. The whole thing was bizarre. Next story, my sense of humor. I knew exactly who it was that complained because they were the only one in the team that had no measurable sense of humor. 15 years on, and I'm talking about you, Christine. Next story, for calling blueberries booblies. I was told it was inappropriate. I was just saying what my family call them because the toddler cannot pronounce blueberries, and I thought it was cute. Next story. I was disciplined for having suffering multiple migraines that were brought about by the lighting in the call center that they said was fine. Got dragged through the whole procedure, involved the PCS, HMRC union. The rep just sat there during the meeting saying nothing, and when we left said, "Well, they did nothing wrong, so there's not much we can do." Another team member who was off multiple times, one time for 3 months with a twisted ankle, however, nothing. Next story. Had a sales director in a startup business who also worked on the road as a rep. All his sales were definite goers, 100% guaranteed. When they inevitably fell through, I screwed up the paperwork and threw it into the HMS fake sales, a box with a little sale I made. He found out and wasn't impressed. Earned me a disciplinary. Next story. Asking my supposed mentor how/why he was doing things the way he was. Of course, because he didn't actually know and was just parroting what he'd been taught years ago without understanding, that was considered as undermining his authority in front of passengers. Next story. For taking a client call on my work mobile in the office, you're not allowed to use your personal mobile in the office. It's my work mobile. Do you want me to ignore customers? Well, they shouldn't call you on your mobile, they should use your landline. You realize they don't know where I am most of the time, so this always reaches me. But what if the junior staff see you and think it's your personal mobile? At which point, I laughed at her and walked off. This was the 50% owner of the company, an awful person who didn't realize how awful she was. I remember just before they paid me out, she'd constantly been saying all the new customers I brought in weren't loyal and didn't make as much as the legacy customers. So I did a quick analysis on costs versus products, sales, and worked out that not only were the new customers far more profitable, but actually, they were starting to lose a lot of money due to mismanagement in other areas. My thanks for this. How did you hack the confidential information? No chunks. I just ran a basic analysis on the numbers I knew. You're the finance director. You should know this already. They had to sell out under a year later due to the issues I found that they refused to act on. There are many, many stories. I often use them still to this day when I teach. Next story, talking to the customers. I was a croupier at the time and was told chatting with the customers and asking about their day, etc., slowed down the speed of the game and therefore slowed down the betting. At the time, I was dealing 3-card poker and only one person was playing. The pit boss expected me to stand in silence and only speak when it was relevant to the game. I take customer care seriously, so this was my first strike against working in a casino. Next story, clean the toaster. Got dragged into 2 separate HR meetings about the use of kitchen appliances at your desk and the appropriate toasting level for the workplace. Next story, didn't get disciplined, but once I was told that apparently my area manager wasn't happy with how I behaved when he came into the store. He has this habit of coming in and not saying anything as he's trying to test staff to ensure they're paying attention to their job as he makes his way to the back of the shop. And well, he came in, I was doing my job. I was not free to acknowledge him because, I was doing something I was paid to do. Also, he never makes any effort to foster a relationship with the lowly sales assistants. He only cares about management. So it's also like, okay, why would I interact with you anyway? Also not formally disciplined, but at a previous retail job in a toy shop, part of my role involved handing over click and collects. I was on the software, gaming department. And for some reason, a kid's bike was in the software department click and collect, instead of being in the big stock room. I let it go out and then have a guy from the bikes, outdoor department, come over and yell at me for letting the bike out without a safety check. 1. Why was it in the software/small items click and collect? 2. I was not trained on the bike department. Next story. I worked for a call center where you logged into a phone when you arrived in the morning, and they tracked all of your breaks and everything via that phone. I got promoted to a team leader, and we still had to follow these rules. Whenever you went on a break, you had to put your phone into a special state. It would then time you. The management could then track people who were late back and tell them off. Anyway, as I said I was a team leader, one day on my way back from lunch, I bumped into a manager from a different department who was asking me some questions about our processes and stuff. This conversation went on for a bit. When I got back to my desk, the operations manager was stood at my desk and blocked me in front of my team for being 2 minutes late. No amount of explaining mattered. After that, I was just flat out honest when I bumped into managers who wanted to talk about work stuff during my lunch. Sorry, I'm being timed, and operations manager told me off last time I was late. Next story, a temporary manager at a popular automotive store. I worked at the time, overheard myself and a colleague having a conversation about autism. They deemed it was inappropriate to talk about autism in a place where customers may hear. Reported me to HR, and I then had to go to a meeting where I explained the conversation had been between myself, long-term diagnosed autistic person, and a colleague, diagnosed about a week before. And we were discussing support and things available to help him better understand his diagnosis. We both got called in for it, and to this day, neither of us, he is still a friend, and I'm pleased to say both of us are now in far better careers, have a single clue why we got called in for it. Next story. Got disciplined, as a nasty colleague started to spread rumors about me. I had pulled her up as she had deliberately forgotten to order important equipment for a project that meant it was delayed by months. Her excuse was, it wasn't needed. The boss was not happy. The nasty girl was overheard saying, I want to get her into trouble. This sparked months of her trying to get me sacked. Spreading rumors I was stopping recruitment, leaking confidential stuff, and just generally gaslighting me. Worse was my boss was believing her. I had to evidence that I hadn't done any of this. Thankfully I could. She is still there, but everyone hates her as she has done it to others. They are trying to manage her out. Next story. Wasn't trained on something. Was made to do the something. Said to boss I didn't know what I was doing, and could I have some training? Wasn't trained on something. Made a mistake doing the something. Missing an issue I didn't know to look for. Said as much. Can't remember exact quote, but it was something like, I've never been trained on the process. Apologies. I've learned and won't repeat the mistake. Pulled out of the office for gross misconduct. Given a verbal warning, told if it happens again, etc. I'm assuming the gross misconduct in this case was pointing out the boss doing a shitty job. Next story. I got blocked for being late one morning, about 15 minutes. Despite getting up early, leaving home 30 minutes earlier than usual to go to a fabricator's, which in the opposite direction of my commute, to pick up a part the workshop desperately needed, and I thought I'd use a bit of initiative and turn up with it at, roughly, opening time, instead of them delivering it in the afternoon. That was the last time I did anything extra off the clock. Next story. Shortly after I arrived for work, I got a call from my best friend. His wife had just left him, and he was hysterical, telling me he was on his way to the river to end it all. I was begging him to be calm and wait for me. I told my boss I had to go because my best mate is about to end his life. I ended up getting a final written warning for going AWOL. I lasted about another 6 months until I found something else, then walked out. Next story. HR I lent a colleague, and he felt threatened by a hyperbolic threat about returning it in good condition. Wasn't really punished, apart from 10-second chat with HR about whether I meant it. And of course, not, because who sane would do that over a book? Then colleague got upset I wouldn't lend him books. Edit. And got marked down in an appraisal for not being a mind reader. Next story. Got pulled into a disciplinary for saying, "God damn, my arse itches," while carrying stock into the back storage area. One of the younger staff who had started earlier that week went to HR and complained because my words made them uncomfortable, even though it was never directed at them, just something I said out loud to myself while carrying stock. Next story. Doing a task differently than everybody else but getting the same results. Managed to figure out a workaround to a process that was a wee bit faster, but because it wasn't the official way of doing things, I got pulled up for it and had 4 managers give me a blocking. Next story. I once placed a femidom over my colleague's Norwich City FC mug to stop his tea going cold whilst he was in a meeting. Next thing you know, I'm in the manager's office. Someone grassed me up. Fair play, the manager telling me off could barely keep a straight face. Next story. New boss/owner told me off for not making sure that he was returning a particularly unreasonable customer's calls. Inquiries after the guy complained. What? What the heck? I'm not your damn PA. I'm just a lassie in an office putting on fax/phone orders and passing on messages. You've got salespeople, and this guy isn't in their areas, so he's yours. And you said you would deal with whatever artificially urgent crap he's called about today. I am not responsible for the company owner's time or workload or diary. You said you would call him back because you didn't want to take his call at that time, so that's on you. But of course, the customer thinks I'm the one ignoring him if the boss doesn't do what he says he will. What I actually did was burst out crying because I was overwhelmed by how unreasonable he was being, and I thought he was a nice man before that. Nearly 20 years later, and I'm still pissed off with the pair of them. Next story. Pulled into a meeting with 2 big bosses saying a colleague had reported I was asleep in the delivery room of a library. No chance to refute it, wouldn't listen to me. And when I tried to deny it, they said denying it only made me look more guilty. I had no issues with other colleagues and, surprise, had never fallen asleep at work. So to this day, I'm baffled as to why that person falsely reported me. I left shortly after and sent a few scathing emails. Unfortunately, I was too young and unaware that these things should have been taken to HR. Next story. In a sales job, in a shop that sells toiletries, I was taken out the back and told off because I was selling products to my friend who had come in, who was buying, quite a few, things solely because it was me. It was a trusted friend who was recommending them, rather than a random member of staff. Apparently, you weren't allowed to sell to friends. In a different job, I was told off for not point-blank ignoring a customer when they were talking to me. Next story. I had one for not communicating to my line manager that the new settlements department was struggling with workload whilst getting used to a new, to them, system. We had just relocated our settlements office from London to Liverpool, made all of the old settlements team redundant, and he was surprised that the new settlements department wasn't as up to speed as our old settlements department. Next story. Was disciplined by my manager for something he said I did. Even though I didn't do it, he and a dozen witnesses knew I didn't. Rather than admit his mistake, he doubled down. HR said, we can't do anything. Next story. Once when I was a kitchen porter, the chefs discovered that in my contract, I had to clean any mess at all in the kitchen. So they began dropping eggs on the floor and asking me to clean it. If the boss, head chef, was there, he would have put a stop to it and told them to clean it. As it was, this idiot deputy manager called me into her office after I refused to clean the eggs. She was genuinely laying down the law to me, and I was only 18. She read through my entire contract and wouldn't accept anything I said. By the time she was done, and she took a while, I was pissed off, but resolved to clean the floor to keep my job. But while I was in her office, a big order of food had come in, and the chefs had to clean the floor themselves and get to work. For the next 10 minutes, I was dancing around them, loudly commenting on how clean the floor was, asking them for cleaning tips, etc. This sounds like workplace bullying from the chefs, but it was more like a bantery work environment, and at times, they were on the receiving end of some housing from me or others. One time we pretended to steal a chef's car, for example. The idiot deputy manager was the problem. Next story. 2008. I worked for the child support agency. Worked out a way to automate most of the tasks, so spend an hour actually working, 6 hours preparing quizzes for the team, surfing the internet, doing what I wanted as I was 19. Contract comes to an end. It was only agency. We all get a call asking if we want another few months at their other office about half a mile away. It's closer to me, so I say yes. First morning, training on some of the new stuff with some new starts. I get pulled into the office at lunchtime. I'm sorry, but we're not going to be asking you to continue with us. Turns out that last year I was in the top X amount of people, I'm sure it was about 20, for unauthorized internet usage for the whole of government agencies. I accepted it. They paid me for the week. They didn't tell the agency, so I got another job through them. That job then led to me meeting the mother of my daughter. So it's the silliest disciplinary reason, but fate dealt me a hand. Next story. I was having a music conversation with my head chef about music. In the meanwhile, there was a woman server prepping something for the front of house. Keep in mind that I've never even talked to her or any other women in my workplace. I tell the HC that I like Marilyn Manson's music, and we start talking about his past allegations. The conversation ends with me saying that he got investigated and the allegations dropped. The server leaves the room visibly upset. Next morning, first thing the manager calls me in the office telling me I was being dismissed after a female member of the staff complained about my behavior towards her and that she has been verbally harassed. Next story. At an old job, I got called into an official meeting about my sickness pattern by my boss. Apparently, the staffing system had flagged a pattern that I only ever called in sick on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. I worked part-time Wednesday to Friday, so of course I was only ever off sick those days. She could have overridden it, as it's not designed to ignore these patterns in part-time staff. She chose to go through a baffling, officially recorded meeting about my concerning sickness pattern, whilst getting annoyed at my answers to questions I couldn't answer anyway other than, I only end up off sick at the end of the week because I don't work the beginning. Next story. Had someone with exactly the same name, forename, and surname as me working in the same office. I joined second, so had to use the long form of my name for anything official, or young, long time ago, versus old. Old retired and 6 months later got called into my manager's office to complain that I wasn't answering my phone or responding to emails over the last few months. Manager was a dumbass who didn't like me or my friends in the office. Ended up having to explain I was still long-form name on all the IT systems and phone directory, and that they had been calling the wrong number and emailing the wrong address for months. Next story? I forgot to ask someone if they had a club card when I worked at Tesco. It was a Karen type with her husband, late teen son, who went to customer service and accused me of all sorts of things like licking the fruit they were buying and smearing the milk in cleaning products. The manager pulled me aside and asked if it was true. I was perplexed and said, "What the heck?" He went to check the CCTV and came back laughing. He showed me and I lost it. Watching 3 people licking grapefruits and rubbing milk with Vaseline was the highlight of the damn decade. I'd only been there less than a week. Next story. 2022. Been disciplined for wearing a bathrobe on the top of workwear while in the morning meetings, over company's Zoom calls, 7:45 in the morning, while working from home due to pandemic. Quickly overturned by me explaining that I'm not the company's representative in any way. I don't have to deal face-to-face with clients. And finally, I have requested the company's dress code, to which I've been replied, it's common sense. Well then, It's common sense to dress warmer when I'm cold, hence the bathrobe on the top, rather than clocking up the thermostat, as I'm not living alone. Next story. My missus was given a final written warning because she took 1 pence from a customer. She is not allowed to take tips at her job, and she doesn't. There is an elderly customer who has been a regular there for over 20 years, and she doesn't have internet access but needed something from Amazon. So she gave my missus £30 and asked her to buy the £29 and 99 pence item. GF reported it to head office. Her big mistake, to maintain transparency. Next thing you know, she is suspended for 2 weeks and then had a disciplinary meeting which ended in a final warning. Madness. Next story. I worked at a doctor's office. I was trying to be too helpful with patient inquiries, specifically finding out exactly what they need from the office. I worked admin and the phones, and doing that rather than just what they ask for, which was usually only part of whatever issue they were having. I never got any complaints from patients, but my supervisor didn't like it, and in hindsight, didn't like me either, so I got disciplinary for time wasting. Even though it would have become another issue down the line, I didn't stay long after that. Next story. Few decades back, worked for a manager who had a stick up his ass. I cycled to work, and one day forgot my work clothes. Asked a colleague to notify the manager I'd be 15 to 20 minutes late, and headed off to the supermarket up the road to buy emergency shirt and trousers. His issue. I turned my PC on before apologizing publicly to him for being late. Those shitty computers took 5 to 10 minutes from power button press to usable desktop. He even ushered me into the conference room for a special scolding, the useless moron. Next story. I got suspended to allow for an impartial investigation into an allegation that I told a colleague I was going to kill her pet rabbit and then eat it. 4 days after I started a new job. I was suspended for a year, on full pay plus overtime. Every time they geared up to have me back, the union threatened strike action if I was reinstated. They then made a complete hash of firing me, and I appealed it and got a year's salary as hush money. I didn't do it, just somebody trying to win favor in the union ranks. Next story. Not disciplined, but the way our leave is worked out manually to inputting on the system is slightly different. 7.24 manually for a day versus 7.4 on the system, and 3.42 manually for half a day versus 3.7 on the system. I was keeping a manual log of my leave and was pulled into the office by a higher manager about 5 times, accusing me of trying to gain extra leave. Mind you, the manager was a horrible who tried to bully most people and got sacked in the end. Next story. I never understood why till staff gets spoken to about too many deletes. I'd sort of get it if I was putting stuff through to a conveniently round number and then binning off the transaction and being caught on CCTV pocketing cash. My dumbest disciplinary was when they told me the upsells from a medium popcorn to a large popcorn was reflecting poorly on me because I was deleting the medium to sell someone a larger, more expensive product. Next story. CFO dropped his old printer into reception, told me what he'd done, and asked me to dispose of it. So I threw it in our WEEE bin. I didn't see the box he'd also brought. He told my manager to fire me. Same guy once reported an issue a lot of users were experiencing. Me and another guy were on lunch. I gave him the fix. Told him to let me know if it didn't work. He tried it. Didn't work. Told my manager to fire us both. Next story. We had a guy in the office who was a genius. Not a figure of speech, an actual genius. Literally a world authority in what he does. One day, the obnoxious manager said, "John, I'm going to have to give you a telling off." John looked up from his work momentarily and said, "You're certainly welcome to try," and carried on with his work. Obnoxious manager just stood there for a moment, then walked off. Next story. Signing on to the till, accidentally pressed the day end button by mistake. The button is directly above the sign-on. I messed up the jobs for the next 2 days for office staff, as they could not do much until a full day has gone through properly. They could tell it was an accident, but I am not the first one to do it. The buttons are underneath each other, like letters on a phone keypad, etc. Next story. A colleague complained about me sending abrupt emails. They were written to the point and in a professional tone. When I asked for more explanation on what the issue was, I was told I didn't use emojis and exclamation points, which made me seem rude. Here's an emoji for you. Ended up leaving for a better job and winning a grievance against them for lots of stuff in the process. Next story. I was pulled into a disciplinary with my manager and HR for helping someone else with their task list whilst I had a spare 5 minutes. I'd been there a week. That manager was a tiny sexist bully, and I did not last long there at all. Probably a good job because it was a dreadful place to work. A large, multinational firm of accountants, all out to screw over their clients. Next story, the time I got pulled up in my annual review for not adhering to the dress code. I wore Crocs to the office one time, in the middle of the summer, the day after I'd been on my feet all day delivering stuff for work, and got about 4 blisters on each foot. I literally bought new shoes that evening, so it would only be one day. My feet would not tolerate any other footwear. Next story, also had a call center job many years ago. I was once 2 minutes late logging into the phones because the CEO of the company stopped me as I was getting out of my car and asked me to help him carry something to his office. My manager pulled me into a meeting and tried to bollock me for being late. I just said to go and talk to the CEO. Next story, this happened to a colleague. Formal warning for drinking alcohol whilst at work. The alcohol, a can of Top Deck Shandy, something it's legal for children to buy, that was sold in the staff canteen. Shortly after this, we decided to warn others by putting up notices of other banned substances, ginger beer and wine gums. Next story, was pulled aside and told I'd spoken inappropriately about incest, for sharing that my mom's first husband went on to later marry his cousin. Weirder still, 10 minutes later, I was pulled aside again with an apology. He was a new manager, didn't have much of a clue how to handle people. Next story, the manager didn't understand the word pensive when I had to write up an interaction with a customer. She told me the word doesn't exist, and only got angrier when I gave her the definition and looked it up. I thought, what the heck am I doing here? Got another job and left. Next story, we were pranking each other, and in his absence, I rearranged the keys on his keyboard to say something sufficiently rude that HR got involved. I remember having to use a second donor keyboard because goats and blow both have an O in them. Next story, I was fired because my negativity was affecting the rest of the team. I got on really well with everyone who worked there, apart from the owner and manager. Next story, worked at Ocado when it first opened in Hatfield, got disciplined for working too hard. We were on piece rate, and by busting my guts, I could double my pay. Next story, working at a dried fruit factory for £5 an hour. I was once disciplined for eating an apricot. They were seriously talking about sacking me. An apricot. Next story, worked in a food warehouse for a large supermarket. We were in the habit of throwing stuff at each other. There was one bloke who was one of these guys who can give it out but not take it. We will call him Toss Bag, for that's what he was. One day, he threw a pallet block at someone. It hit them in the head, causing bleeding, and they covered for him and said the shelf in a cage had come down on them. Next day, I was trying to hit him with something from some considerable range, and having no luck, my mate said, "Write his name on it. You'll hit him then." So I wrote TOSSBAG on this peach, hurled it down the line, and scored a direct hit to the eye. He then went off crying to management. There was a big hue and cry. Several people were suspended under investigation. We were tipped off by the union rep that CCTV was a bust. It didn't show anything untoward, but I was in trouble, as someone had given a statement saying they'd seen me throwing something. So I ended up being disciplined for chucking a piece of fruit at someone. I actually got away with it as well. I maintained that I had seen something on the floor, picked it up, and lobbed it in the bin, which I accepted was not sensible and could have caused injury to Toss Bag. The manager investigating then dropped the offending peach on the table, in a evidence bag no less, and said, "I've got a theory. You were all messing around chucking stuff at each other, and you thought it would be funny to write your mate's name on it and chuck it at him, because I don't know about you, but I've never seen a peach with Toss Bag written on it before." Thinking quickly, I replied, "Well, that explains how it got on the floor then. Someone did what you said, missed him, and it was on the floor where I found it." A girl I was friendly with in HR told me that he was busting his chops to fire me, but the HR manager wouldn't let him because the evidence wasn't good enough to defend at tribunal. But the investigation had uncovered a whole catalog about 1 minutes and shenanigans, so we both got suspended without pay for a week, told in no uncertain terms that we were a pair of cunts, and henceforth on the thinnest of thin ice, and given final written warnings to boot. Next story. A colleague kept opening their car door whilst parking to check how far away from the wall their boot was. They had about 1.5 meters of space. I tried to be helpful and signaled that they could keep going back further. They ignored me, so I started to walk away. They got out of their car and shouted that I need to get something out of the boot, is Gortio. I looked at them and couldn't figure out where I'd seen them before. They were in the same building, and I'd seen them once and spoken to them, but I was trying to remember. They knew my name just by looking at me, so they must have been someone significant. I'd just driven 100 miles to get there, so wasn't thinking straight. I said, "Okay, sorry, I was trying to help." They continued shouting that they needed to get something from their boot. I said, "Okay, see ya," turned and started walking into the building. Later on, I had someone else at work come up to me and say this person filed a complaint against me, saying I was rude, and then walked away muttering to myself and laughing at them. I tried to explain the situation, but they wouldn't let me speak. Then I got told off later on by higher management and said they should have been doing a written disciplinary for it. Again, they wouldn't let me share my side of the story. Turns out, I had spoken to the person a few weeks prior for a few minutes, which is why they knew who I was. I just meet so many different people now. Patients, colleagues, parents of patients. Plus I temp, so I am meeting new teams of people every day that I will recognize someone but have no idea why. The car park is usually quite full, and if you drive down one aisle and there are no spaces, you can only reverse out of it to try the next aisle. Sometimes if there's an empty space somewhere, I'll point to it if I see someone coming in, just to try and make things easier for people. Most people will see it and take the space and thank me. This person though, I think I've done it twice not realizing it's them, and they will see me and actively ignore me. It's funny watching them have to reverse slowly because they're being so stubborn. I will not stop trying to be helpful because one person doesn't like to be helped. Next story. I work in healthcare. Senior management messed up the rota for a Friday by not paying any attention as to who was on annual leave that particular day. 3 absent members of staff were allocated to cover various clinical areas. The lack of cover wasn't discovered until after lunch because all the senior managers were also on holiday that particular day. Cue panic and mayhem as various junior managers on shift tried to juggle staffing and ensure the clinical areas had their needs met for the day. I was pushed and pulled from pillar to post, micromanaged to the nth damn degree, working like an absolute hound trying to plug all the gaps and get everything sorted. I dared to stay an additional 30 minutes over my allotted hours to complete all the additional stuff piled onto my plate. Fast forward to the Tuesday morning after the long public holiday weekend, and I was called into the office. Was I thanked for my efforts in covering more than twice my usual workload for the Friday afternoon? Was my positive can-do attitude to assist patients and ensure their needs as well as hospital targets were met praised? Was it bollocks? I was told, in future, if you stay beyond your scheduled hours, you must have approval from a senior manager. I did reply I would have sought approval, but none of them were in attendance that day, and I was so rushed off my feet I didn't even consider disturbing them at home. I was told that wasn't a good enough answer, and I wouldn't be paid for my time. My final answer was my written 4 weeks notice on that manager's desk 5 minutes later. They said they were both surprised and disappointed. Next story. I was disciplined for taking a request literally. 1989. Staff Christmas dinner in the staff canteen. I'm not veggie, but I chose the veggie option as I was sick of the standard Christmas fare. Everyone's meal was served, except mine. My starter hasn't been served yet, and others were tucking into their desserts. So, I complained. The canteen manager came over and said, "You vegetarians are all the same, always complaining." As a wet behind the ears 19-year-old, I was a bit taken aback with her rude attitude, but came back at her with, "I'm not vegetarian. I just happen to have chosen the vegetarian meal." Later, I noticed a card on the table. It said, "If you enjoyed your meal, tell your friends. If not, please tell us." So, I told them I wasn't impressed with the meal, the service, or the manager's attitude. That was Friday. On Monday, I'm called into the directors who tore me to shreds. Turns out the canteen manager was in a relationship with one of the other directors, who had reported me to my director. I was on the phone to an agency that afternoon. Within a week, I'd found another job, and 4 weeks later, I'd gone. I was 19, went into a contract role, went through the 90s, noughties, and some of the 10s as a contractor, then took a permie job for a few years to see me through to 50, when I retired early. Thanks goes to the manager of the staff canteen for giving me the kick up the arse I needed to enable my early retirement. Next story. As a union rep, I've got countless stories to tell. Some of the funniest I probably couldn't post, as they'd be identifiable because of their uniqueness. Stupidest one that comes to mind, though, is when I represented someone who while working for a large bank, would take a newspaper to the toilet for his morning dump. Said newspaper was in an envelope on the desk, as to not make it obvious, but his manager got wind of it. This lad didn't smoke, didn't drink coffee, worked through his lunch hour most days, but got picked up because he'd spend 15 minutes pooing and take the paper with him. And yes, we did ask whether the time spent or the act of taking the paper was the offending act, and it was taking the paper. He was given a warning, and we didn't even win the appeal. Laughable.